Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. Today I have a very exciting guest on my channel. It's Dorothy Bulac-Eriksen. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice. It's so nice that you joined me. I was a huge fan. So basically, if you guys know Dorothy, you probably know her as a costume designer for a lot of like very famous movies like Hunger Games, Jumanji, and Pirates of Caribbean, and Star Trek, and Godzilla, Marvel, Avengers, Buffy, like, and so on and so forth. However, you got my attention as a knitwear designer. There's like a whole other side of you. And I have to ask you later on about your hula dancing experience as well. But we'll get to that later. Tell me like a little bit about your knitting journey, like how it started and how it's connected with your day job.
Well, a lot of people have a backstory that they've been knitting since they were a child. And actually, I probably should have been saying that because my mother was a prolific knitter. However, I'm left-handed. And she thought the way to deal with that is to knit right in front of me, and I was supposed to mirror her actions. And all it did was lead to tears. And so I had this really bad attitude about knitting. It's just going to lead to tears. And so I just left it at that. And so this is going to be a very long-winded, like, how does this have to do with knitting? But it eventually I'll get there. And so what I ended up doing was sewing. I learned how to sew, and I'm old enough that there were home ec classes that I could take. So not only that, in middle school and high school, there were fashion design courses and costume design courses. And I think that was really all about this very dynamic art teacher that I had. And she was in cahoots with the sewing teacher. So that's why I was working with the plays, and then starting to do other high school plays and other community college things, because she was connected with that and doing their productions. And, she taught me how to draw. And this was all when I was 13. I signed up for these electives, and I just said at 13, okay, I'm going to be a fashion designer or a costume designer. That's just what I'm going to do. And another thing happened when I was in high school, although at the time, it doesn't seem like it had anything to do with my career, is that the movie Star Wars came out, and came out when I was a junior, and I couldn't wait to turn 16 because that meant I could get a driver's license and I could drive to the movie theater. It wasn't about carousing with my friends, it was going to see the movie theater. And it really kind of instilled, because I was completely cuckoo about it, my love for science fiction and fantasy. So and I also liked astronomy because I think that had to do with my dad was an engineer during the Apollo missions. And so he was an engineer, and I kind of think that that's why I have my engineer brain, because I figure out how to do complex costumes and knitting patterns. So when I went to college, I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, it was also known as FIDM. And I was a fashion design major, and I learned how to drape, and I learned how to make patterns, and I learned how to illustrate my design thoughts. And, right out of college, I got these really obscure jobs for working for companies that make dark rides and restaurants that are like Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, and it was like, well, this isn't costume design, but whatever. And so, dark rides are those things like Pirates of the Caribbean, and there are these robotic things, and they're like this, and they have this one action, and it's not like they're going to straighten up and you can put on your costume. They're going to be like this, and you have to drape a costume that's like that. And so you have to learn how to put zippers and things like that. But I also learned how to do walk around costumes, which I really enjoyed because I got to learn to use different materials like sheet foam, which cosplayers know all about, and glues, and that concept of building away from the body instead of, close to it. So you don't even know that there's a human in it. But my first love was fashion, and, making Woody Woodpeckers and Charlie Brown bodies just wasn't satisfying that itch. So When I heard that one of my friends was said, hey, you know what, you should go for this interview. I'm about to leave this job for the garment industry, being a pattern maker for a junior sportswear company. I said, oh, sure, I'll finally get to work in the garment industry. So I got the job. We designed the designer designed the first season. I did all the patterns, and then they fired the designer, and the owner of the company, you know, I think it was because they were cheap. They just said, well, you're the designer now, but I was still making my own patterns. So you can see why that led to burnout. But it was so wonderful to go to the local mall and see my clothes in the window display, or I'd be going to a club and I'd see someone dancing and they were wearing one of my tops. But I have to say, after a year and a half of doing it, I was exhausted of trying to convince the company. It was a constant struggle to try to do innovative new things. And, you know, the boss would always just say, well, here's a jacket I bought at the mall, and just knock it off and put it in new fabric. So another person asked me, a friend said, hey, you know, I'm working on this really low budget movie. Would you want to help me out on it? And I'd never worked on a movie before, but I said, sure. That gave me an excuse to leave the garment industry. So, but I never worked on a movie. I didn't know how it was structured. You know, this movie was this really, really low budget, badly written film called Wired to Kill. And in fact, the working title was called Booby Trap. And I'm so glad that they changed it, because I wouldn't want Booby Trap on my IMDb page, which is the internet movie database for, you know, for all the people who work on anything in movies and film. So I quickly learned that there are 3 divisions in the wardrobe department. You have the design team. Sometimes it's just one designer, but sometimes they'll have assistants. Then you have the finished costumers. They take the costume and they are on set with it. They take continuity notes. They tag everything. They move things in front. They're the supervisor. They really kind of are the brains of the thing. And then the 3rd division is the custom made. And that's what actually I am. I'm not the designer. I'm a specialty costumer. And so my friend hired me mainly because I knew how to make kind of Mad Max type of clothes. But as you probably heard, he left to get a more lucrative job right before we started shooting. And so I ended up having to be all 3 divisions. And that was definitely a learning experience. And I did survive that juggernaut, just barely. But I really did have to assess my career goals. You know, I wanted to be a fashion designer and a costume designer, and I had done that all before I was 23. But it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, you know, and a lot of people think it's just the designer, but there are many hands on deck. And so I realized, is it more important for me to have the notoriety of saying I was the designer, but I would hate my job, but I would hate my life because they go to a million meetings? Or is it more important for me to have a creative hands-on thing? And so that's really what I wanted to do. So ultimately I became a specialty costumer. So what is specialty costumer? As a specialty costumer in the union, I've worked on, you know, superhero suits for characters like Thor and Captain America and Batman. I've made real movie spacesuits, and I've also worked on real spacesuits for SpaceX for prototypes, which really freaked me out because I thought, oh no, I only know how to make fake things. I don't want to have somebody's life in my hands. But they assured me, no, it's just a prototype. And I've made clothes that go on creatures like the Muppets, or I worked on this really low budget Whoopi Goldberg film where she was solving crime with a dinosaur, with a T-Rex. So I was making clothes for all the dinosaurs, to making the actual creatures like Godzilla or, you know, the Hellboy monsters. You know, it just really is any kind of costume that needs some special something on it. And so I've worked on Star Trek movies and blah, 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 blah. So if you go on my IMDb page, you notice it's all about science fiction and fantasy. So you see how my Star Wars thing kind of played into it. But I'm sure you're wondering, like, how on earth did I change my attitude about knitting and learn to love it? And I don't think of my past as like, oh, in 2013, I did this and that. It's more of like, well, when I was working on Captain America, Winter Soldier, this happened. And that's I think of my life as like a series of projects that are strung up on a life necklace. And so I really have to credit my friend Marilyn Manson, who I met on Captain America, Winter Soldier, because we worked fantastically as a team together. We made so many Marvel characters together, like Thor and the Falcon and Drax and Nebula and Captain Marvel. And we would either break it up and say, okay, how are we going to do this character? We're going to, okay, you do the legs, I do the cuirass, you do the arms, I do the hood and the cowl. Or she'll do the whole thing and she'll say, Dorothy area, where I have to kind of zhuzh it up. But the thing about Marilyn that I love is that she is a recreational knitter. And she slowly kind of reintroduced knitting to me as a fun, kind of gently centering yourself kind of thing. And she knew how to push me. You know, I would start on things that were very simple, but then she said, you know, I think you should try some 3-yarn knitting. And I thought, oh, I can't do that. But then she'd say, oh, but look, it's Doctor Who, it's the TARDIS, a knit cap. And I thought, oh, I have to do that. So, you know, she knows I like a challenge, but she knew, you know, with most knitters, you want to make sure that it's only as much as you can do. And we worked in these union shops where you have 2 15-minute breaks and a half an hour lunch. And what would happen is the second the break bell would go, we'd drop whatever we were doing and pick up our knitting. And we'd be knitting away. And people thought we were crazy. It's like, why are you knitting? Isn't that like more work? But you and I know what knitting can do. It is, you know, it's a meditative, a restorative kind of thing. And unless you're doing a lace pattern, and I would just, you know, leave the lace patterns at home. So I would knit and rejuvenate my brain. And it would be enough for me. Then when break was over, I'd go, now I'm back to work. How am I going to do that Star-Lord lapel? And I was refreshed. My head was in the right place. So I was completely obsessed with knitting and crocheting. And now is the time with YouTube that you can learn any technique at any time. And I didn't need my mother trying to show me, although I like in-person instruction. And although I am a left, and what I like about it is that you can use either hand. It doesn't matter what dominant hand, although with crocheting, I do have to use I'm a left-handed crocheter. So I do have to kind of mirror that.
Wait a second. How did crochet happen? Like you just like snuck it in, but like as
you get tired of the knitting. And also, you know, I do like crochet in that with knitting, you have all these live stitches, but then crochet, it's much more forgiving. You only have one live thing. Oops, I made a mistake. Just rip it out. So in a sense, I would do like knitting, and I do prefer knitting. I like the look of knitting, but crocheting is just almost therapeutic. Like, I'm tired of knitting, I'm going to do some crocheting. And I do plan to do some crochet patterns. However, because I'm left-handed, it's really hard for me to think about flipping, and I'm a little intimidated about how to write a crochet pattern. So I have to have somebody's help with that to learn how to do that crochet thing, but I fully intend to have that happen. So Marilyn and I were really good partners in crime in the knitting. And one of the things, it all happened when we were working on Star Trek Picard, and we were on the first season, we were working really long hours, and we were feeling a little sorry for ourselves that we thought, how can we pamper ourselves? And we noticed that the Norwegian knitting superstars Arne and Carlos were going to come into town in LA, and we thought, oh, let's pamper ourselves and go see them on our one day off. And we found out that it was going to cost $3,000 just to see them. It wasn't we could just see them. We had to sign up for a knitting seminar and stay at this exclusive hotel. So we were really depressed until we found out that they were also offering a knitting cruise / go see the Northern Lights thing in Norway. And it was actually less expensive for us to go see them in Norway. So, you know, we decided to do that. So here we are, two Southern California ladies who have never braved a Scandinavian winter. And we got our puffy coats and our furry boots, and we hightailed it to Norway. And it was such a gas. It was just like you're knitting with this beautiful scenery going by. It's not like you're on top of on deck and you're knitting. And they would take daily excursions to yarn factories and yarn stores, and it was really wonderful. I highly recommend it. And I'm not being paid for this, but but there was a huge hiccup in that first of all, we said, we're not going to go all the way to Scandinavia and not see our motherland, because I'm half Swedish. Marilyn is Danish descent. So I thought, okay, after Norway, we're going to go to Sweden and Denmark. So we fly to Stockholm, and the second we land, Trump issued the travel ban, and we were stranded. And we eventually made it home. You can actually go Google my name. You could probably find the interviewer thing where this news reporter saw us and interviewed us because we looked so forlorn. Like, how do we get out of here? But we made it home. But then it was the lockdown, and I was supposed to start on the next season of Star Trek Picard, but the whole entertainment industry was shut down. So I was going to wait for retirement, but I realized this is the time. This is the time to come up and do my own thing. I mean, that's why it's not like your creative brain stops when you don't have a job. That's why everybody was making sourdough bread when we were in lockdown. So, you know, I decided to do my thing. And I called my company Syzygy Designs. Syzygy is an actual word. It means the relationship between two or three heavenly bodies, and like an eclipse is a syzygy. So my logo has 3 balls of yarn like they're planets. So basically, that's how I've come to knitting my designs. I only have 5 right now because you can see I've worked long hours, but that might change. That might change soon.
Well, when you did, I mean, is being costume
a specialty costumer.
Specialty costumer. I mean, I saw one of your interviews, and you mentioned that you think of the fashion as like onion, so it has layers. So you go from the outside to inside, or from inside to outside. I mean, having worked with all different kinds of materials in your day job, was it helpful for you when it came to design? Were you overthinking your designs? Did you feel like you need to be super creative with your designs? Like, tell me about that.
I do. You know, especially with I feel like I want to create something that's different from everybody else. I mean, you can do something as simple, and there's a million things on Ravelry you can find, but why do that? I mean, that's the whole point of me being a specialty costumer. I'm asked to do what I do because they want to elevate it, to see something different and innovative. So that's how I'm approaching it, with just trying to, you know, see things in a different way and play with it. And maybe that's putting an onus on me to make it more unusual, but why not? I mean, I'm up for the challenge.
When you do something, right? Like let's take your first design. Did you have a person in mind who is going to wear that? Like, are you planning it for Star Trek, or are you planning it for some regular lady somewhere?
I would say, inspiration comes in different ways, because sometimes, as most people know, you're inspired by the yarn. It's kind of like a person writing a song. What comes first, the lyrics or the music? And sometimes, and then in fashion design, same thing. Some people like to start with the fabric, or and then go with the design, or reverse. So we see, sometimes we get inspired by the yarn. Sometimes I'll be inspired by a technique that I like and that I want to design around that technique. But sometimes for instance, this one, I can talk about Bejazel. That's my workhorse right now, but this is a new one that I'm about to release. It's the same one as this one. This is a shallower version. I'm calling the Alien Emissary. And the Alien Emissary was a character that just played in Star Trek, Picard season 2. She was supposed to have this huge role, and you see her for a split second, but I was inspired by our textile designer, who created these beautiful feathery Devore velvet feathers that she layered on. And I get inspired not just by some things, but by other people. And I love being in conjunction with other creative people. So I designed this around the inspiration that she gave me, and especially because I was working with a lot of black at the time. It was black, all these black Romulan costumes. And so I would just kind of go to her place to just go, oh, this is so pretty. Let's show me more. So you don't know where the inspiration is going to come from.
Well, I mean, when you design, right, do you have a clear vision, or is it because, like, if I'm thinking of onions, I'm thinking like you do one thing and then you add another thing and then
Right.
you add something else. Like, when you design, is that the same onion technique that you use on your designs?
I don't know if I do that much, because costumes, you have to do so many layers. Unless you're doing maybe amigurumi, that you're stacking that way, and that's kind of not my vibe. What I kind of like about knitting is that it's although I can talk about texture, which I really enjoy, I like that it's more a one-dimensional thing, or that you can let it play and be what it is. Having said that, I mean, if we want to talk about textures, I do like employing my specialty costuming, thinking of coming up with new ideas. And like, for instance, this is Yondu Zero. I don't know if you can see it. And it's got these fins here, because I really wanted to push it out and be 3-dimensional. And I employ a kind of tucking technique and it's kind of like a 3-needle bind off, but without the bind off. And here, this is also the Star Lord. It's got the same kind of tucks. And I love the idea of going 3D on something. And I also love intentional holes. I'm
a huge fan, actually.
Yeah, I love the idea of lace knitting, but it tends to, for me, to just be a little bit too grandmothery. So I want to be a little bit more edgier with things. And so I love intentional holes, because it's like, it's really kind of alien-like and organic. I'm not averse to doing pretty things, but prettiness is in the eyes of the beholder. Things can look like a scary alien, but that could still be beautiful. I like my first one. You were talking about the first one. I like to also, this is a way to get inspired. I like to go through my stitch Bibles, as many people like to do. And I like to see a technique, but then I manipulate it so it's something new. For instance, I love the Indian cross stitch, but I was able to manipulate it to be just like a diamond. And that's how the basis of this graviton fade of using the diamonds and that. So that's another way that I like to play with textures. And another thing about the Bejazel, which I can talk about the inspiration that how she inspired me, that character. But I like to play with thin and thick yarns in the same piece. And for instance, this one, I use a DK weight for the spine and a fingering weight for the holy bits, the web bits. And just as a specialty costumer, I feel like it's all about playing with interesting textures and strong lines that kind of direct and play against the secondary background. And there was this fashion director, Deanna Vreeland, who was the fashion director at Vogue. And she famously said, the eye needs to travel. And I agree with that. And that when you use high-low textures, that makes your eye travel. And I think that's really important in a design.
Well, let's talk about your learning process, because okay, somebody shows you how to knit and purl, and then suddenly you go from there and you like change knitting dictionary and all that stuff. How do you learn? Like, where do you find sources of material, and like, what's your learning process?
I think it's important to, somebody once asked, well, how do you know good art and bad art? And there's responses, you just got to go see a lot of art. And you can't just like learn a few things and then just go for it. I had to have 7 years of just being a neophyte and just like, I know nothing, tell me everything. You're an open sieve and you drink it all in, and you just do it all. And that's why it was just like obsession day and night. I remember reading Keith Richards' autobiography, who's the guitar player for Rolling Stone. And I loved listening about his complete obsession of just, it was eat, sleep, and knit, you know, for me was what it was. And so you just have to completely exhaust yourself. And it wasn't until the lockdown I realized, okay, you're ready, it's time. But I probably would have just still kept going doing other people's things. But when I realized that, I was like, oh, I used to watch the knitting shows on TV, and it all used to be new to me. And then I thought, oh no, I know how to do that. I know how to do that too. And then finally you realize, okay, now's the time that you can play.
How about writing patterns? Was that a learning process? Like, was it difficult for you to figure out like how much to explain, how little to explain, how not over explain?
Yeah, because when you read other other patterns, you realize, oh, she went on and on and on about that, and I just want this. But I might over explain a little bit, but I do like, somebody explained to me, I took a knitting class, a knitting writing class, and she said, you know, it's really important at the beginning to have the romance. She called it, you have to have the romance. And I love that because it needs to show the inspiration of the thing. So I'm always gonna put that a part of it, because that's usually the inspiration. But I do know that it's important to explain everything, and that I do kind of want to make it seem, because some of these things might be complicated, and I know when I'm reading a knitting pattern, I want to not have them assume I know how to do something. So I'll say, you know, I don't want to say that you're an absolute beginner, you should know some things, but I'm going to explain it a little bit. So, you know, it's not my paper. I'll write a whole long thing and somebody else will print out. If it's lots of pages, so be it.
Well, in your regular job, you don't need to worry about marketing. You have people who do everything. You just have to concentrate on your creative process. When it comes to your designs for knitwear, you are one woman show. You have to do everything. You have to deal with your social media, you have to grow that, you have to write the pattern, you have to reply to the messages about like errors in the pattern, I don't know, like everything, right?
Yes.
Was that difficult for you to like start doing everything, being responsible for everything?
I I at this point in my career, in my life, I actually do like it, because I liken it to, I talked about the original, where you in the wardrobe department, you have the design team, you have the finished costumer, you have the custom made. And so now I'm being all three again of doing it. Because it was great where like I finish a costume, then I hand it off and I don't have to worry about it. But I finally, it's time that I enjoy doing all that. It's my baby now, and I get to have credit for it, and nobody else has to, take that away from me. So I actually really enjoy that aspect of it. And this is a good time in our internet is a blessing and a curse, but I absolutely love Instagram, because I feel like I can put out all the fun things of my life, and it's kind of a retrospective too. But I love that a total stranger can see something of mine, and we can appreciate the same beauty of something and have a connection. So it's a great time to be doing this, I have to say.
Well, when you work, again, back to the movies, right? You have a movie, so there is characters, and that's your inspiration, basically. Like you go from the character to how they should look. Whereas when you design your knitwear, where does that inspiration come from?
Oh, I do get inspired a lot by some of the characters that I've worked with, like the Jaisal here. She was a character in the first season of Star Trek Picard, and I worked on her costume, but I loved the vibe that she had, so I designed it around her. Where is it? The Star-Lord, we worked on his costume, and he wore this, the designer said, okay, we want him to be like the rock and roller of the Steven Tyler of space, So he wore a scarf, but I thought I want to design it so it's the way I was, if I made it, what he would look like. So that's kind of the inspiration there. The things coming up is like this alien emissary, but I'm also halfway through designing this one called I'm Batman, because I've worked on so many Batman suits, and I can't wait, because that's going to look like a bat wingspan, and I think it's going to make the lace knitters happy. It's really exciting. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up and I thought, because I worked on Spock's volcano suit in one of those movies, and I thought I've got to do a Spock volcano suit inspired scarf. I don't know. My brain can't shut up at night because I have so many ideas. And then other times I'll find the yarn. I think, I don't know, this is going to be something, but or maybe it'll be sciencey. It's just kind of, I can't wait to have more time so I can just give it my all-time devotion.
What about yarn? Like, are you a yarn snob?
I do like my natural fibers, I have to admit. I remember the very first yarn crawl I went to, I ran into this Australian lady, and she had been to every single one of the stores, and she saw I brought my daughter, who was just starting out too, and she asked, oh, I have all this acrylic yarn, would you like it? And my daughter politely said no, but she just went, life is too short for acrylic yarn. But I have to say, I have a friend who does yarn bombing, and she actually they prefer acrylic yarn because it will hold up. All this natural fiber, it's just going to go away in 2 seconds. So I am personally yarn snob, but I also mix and match with my yarns. I don't really care if you're putting a wool next to a linen next to, I just played with work with one that was made out of seaweed, a yarn. Oh, it's just, I think it's all exciting.
I mean, have you ever thought about using some crazy kind of materials for your knitting?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I want to make sure with the knitting patterns, though, that people can have access to it. So that would be my only holdback. But if personally, oh, all bets are off. I will knit with a shopping bag, you know, plastic. I'll just do anything, because that plays into what I did originally for my career as a specialty costumer.
Well, I mean, out of your wardrobe, what percentage would you say is handmade in one way or another?
Oh, you know, it's kind of probably like the, you know, that saying, the cobbler's children have no shoes. You know, it's like the last thing I feel like doing is sewing for myself. It used to be that I would have summers off, and because I insisted upon it, because I have a daughter and I wanted to be there for her. And during the summers, then I would sew something for myself. But there's not as much sewing. However, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of shawls. And in fact, in the winter time, I would make it a point of, like, I'm not leaving the house until I at least wear one of my shawls, and I could wear something I've made different every day. I mean, it just, you know, when you get cuckoo crazy, you gotta just keep going with it.
When you buy yarn, what attracts you? Like, are you going after certain textures? Are you going after certain colors? What catches your attention?
I do like to stay with fingering and DK weight. I feel like, but again, that would be too snobby. I might see something that's really spectacular. I really have a tendency to go for colors, and I love gradient yarns that slowly turn. I mean, that's what all the heavy lifting is done on this one, because it changes forming. I only have to have 2 yarns. But I love a good color combination, and I love, but I learned that I keep going to these same colors. I have to stop myself. It's like, put down that chartreuse. I cannot, it's like it's like squirrel. I see chartreuse and I've got to get it. And that's not everybody's favorite, but everybody does have their favorite. But I do love color.
Well, I mean, are you disciplined when you going into that store? Do you have a plan for what you need to buy and what you're going to use it for?
Right. I had learned after like the 5th yarn crawl with my friend Marilyn that it doesn't do any good when we say, okay, we're going to go in there and we're not going to buy anything, but we always come out and buy things. So I learned that I have to have a list. I have project lists, and this is what I'm looking for. And then that disciplines me to say, okay, I'm just looking for this. And you do occasionally get squirreled for this fabulous thing, but I try to keep it. We just had finally a yarn crawl a couple months ago after 2 years of not having one. And I have to say I was very disciplined, but was still
killing you, wasn't it?
Because we decided to do all of them, 8 or 10. We went to every single store this time.
How many projects do you usually work on at the same time? Like, are you a monogamous kind of girl?
Oh, no. I think that plays into, like, how do you find time for your knitting? And you know, this is really tough for me because, as I said, I work long hours. I start at 10 hours and then it quickly goes to 10 hours or 12 hours of working. And then they clump on the Saturdays. So, you know, how do you find time for the knitting? And I say that it's all about forgiving yourself for having several works in progress. So I have a whip in the car, you know, for when you're at the car wash or you're standing in line at Costco. You as a knitter feel weird not having idle time. I have a whip that I have up in my enclosed sunroom, and I can close the door, and that's the more complicated one because my family knows not to disturb me because I'm probably counting. And then I have another whip that's at the TV because that's your TV knit, and you can, it's kind of mindless enough that you can still follow a storyline, although you can't do that with subtitles. But I also bring, I think it's important to have one at work. As I said, it's all about like those little breaks. And I never bring though my own designs to work because that kind of utilizes the same part of my brain that I use to create costumes. So I just want it to be mindless enough that, you know, I use someone else's design so I could just, you know, my brain will just tell me what to do and my brain will float away for 15 minutes. But there is something weird about, I don't know if you get this too. It seems like you pick up your knitting and that's when everybody comes to see you about something.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, oh, can you see this? That's a thing. Why do you have to bother me when I'm working on this thing? So I actually turned it on its ear. I realized, okay, sometimes I do need to see someone. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take my break now and I'm going to knit. And maybe it'll show the universe, like it'll whisper it in that costume designer's ear. I suddenly feel like I need to go see Dorothy. I don't know. Maybe it's just like costumers are very superstitious, but that's, I refuse to make it use me. I'm going to use it, that idea.
Well, are you organized with your notes? Like, do you know exactly where you left off, like at the end of that 15 minutes period?
Well, I try. So, you know, I was working on one that I'm Batman, and it's you know, very complicated in that because there's so many drop this and add this. And my husband looked at it and he said, "Oh my God, this is like computer code." You know, and I know, but you know, it's a foreign language until you learn the symbols, and then it's fine. So I try to make I don't believe in astrology, but I use it when I like the ideas of it. I use it, and I always say that instead I was not raised by wolves. I was raised by Virgos. So my mom and my dad are Virgos. My sisters were, so they're very they're very organized. So me being a Libra, I'm just like pretty flings and all this kind of stuff. They kind of orchestrate and got me very organized. So I really enjoy good organization.
Well, I mean, talking about like faith and like you don't know what kind of influence people play on you, do you think the fact that you knit everywhere in public and at work influence other people to try knitting? Does it always strike conversations?
Oh, for sure it does. You know, people, especially we had National Knitting Day just the other day, and I like knitting in public because I think people have an idea that it's just some little old lady thing. Although now I'm a little old lady, I'm 60 years old now, but I definitely, I think it influences. I know that I've been posting on Instagram some of my things, and my high school friend just posted me, said, I've just decided to learn how to knit because I want to be able to do your patterns eventually. And I was so taken by that they get inspired. There's nothing like seeing a fun design and think, I'm gonna just strive towards that.
When you see other people making your designs, how does that feel?
Oh my God. That is like the better than heroin. I mean, not that I know heroin, but it's such a drug to see. And what I like about knitting patterns is that it's your baby, but then it becomes your baby. It becomes your special thing. And I love that this is a community that we can all influence each other. I love the fact that I can be here or Portugal or wherever, but someone, I mean, people have bought my patterns in Iceland, in Denmark, in China, and it's amazing how the world knits, and it doesn't matter. It's the great uniter of people.
Are you ever surprised by like choices of colors other people use on your designs?
Oh, very much so. Especially because, you know, I'm always veering to those same colors, chartreuse and all this. And then somebody comes up with, I'm just blown away. I'm absolutely blown away by the ideas that they come up with, definitely. And, you know, you don't work in a vacuum. You like to bounce off other people, and I get inspired by them too.
Well, when those ideas in the middle of the night wake you up, do you write them down? Do you have like a diary of your ideas?
Well, that's the thing with me. This is a little insight on me, and people who are close to me know. It's like I don't sleep that much. I I've finally forgiven myself for this, because I'm happy if I get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And I think it is because my brain is constantly going, and I'm problem solving. And I used to write things down, but then I'm up and writing things and I can't go to sleep. So the irony is that like the ultimate thing for me to do is I can't sleep. So I'll go on the couch and I'll knit, because you know that knitting is so therapeutic and meditative that you get sleepy as long as you just put it down and you don't keep knitting when you're tired. You know, but then I just want to sleep right then and there. And that is also why I love knitting so much, is that it calms my head. But it also is this weird way of it calms one alpha wave or whatever, but then you can still think about other things. So it's tough. I don't sleep much, but then I have lots of ideas. So hopefully I'll have more time very soon that I'll be able to get all this stuff and publish it.
Well, I saw on Instagram you posted some of your sketchings back from the fashion school. When you design something, do you start with a sketch, or do you knit and then let it evolve? What's your process?
I do like to do a rough sketch of sometimes that's the goal. Like I say, I want to have it to be a crescent shape, and I want to have this, and I want to have this. And so you kind of have to figure out, how do I get there? So I do kind of like to go that way. I'll definitely do samples, you know, like a sample of a technique, so I know I can do it. But I do think that sketching is what helps me the most.
You like when you knit other people's pattern, do you swatch? Do you love swatching? Do you hate swatching? What's your relationship with swatching?
I don't swatch. I'm not a gauge swatcher. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't do it. I know that I should, but there is something about inertia, you know, about it being inspired and just kind of going with it. And sometimes it takes the mojo out of you when you do a little swatch. So sue me if I'm like not doing it by the book, but I like to just dive in head first and see what happens. And that's kind of like why I like shawls more than maybe I usually do a sweater once a year, but gauge is more important, and swatching is probably more important when you're doing something like that. But shawls, all bets are off.
When you knit other people's patterns, like what's the chances of it looking like the pattern at the end? Like, do you improvise? Do you customize? Do you add yourself a little bit?
Now I do. Now I improvise. Now, you know, I say, oh, I see where this is going. Well, let's mix it up here and do a little something there. So, but now I know enough to do that. I think that just comes from experience.
Well, let's talk about the next stage of your life, or the plan for it. So you are about to move to another country and become a full-time knitting designer, right?
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I didn't think this was going to be happening so soon. I thought I was going to wait a couple more years, but we took a trip we kind of took the retirement trip. We first, we heard great things about Portugal. We have a friend who lives there. we went there, and of course I hit a couple yarn stores while I was there just to suss things out. And I also am a Portuguese purler. I like to put my yarn around my neck and do purling that way. Surprisingly, I didn't see any knitters there while I was there, but they do have yarn stores. But we fell in love with Portugal. We also tried places, looking around in places in the States, because we had to pick up our daughter in Chicago, but we realized, no, we've got to do this. My husband just retired January 1st, but he has 7 years on me. But that, I think we realized we can do Portugal. We can afford Portugal. You can retire early, Dorothy, and then you can dedicate, just the thought of, I can dedicate all my time now to designing shawls just thrills me to no end. So this, instead of working for someone else, for someone else's design, or it's really kind of my thing, but somebody else takes the credit for it, it's now going to be my thing. So I'm really excited. We're hoping to be there full time in 2023. So we'll see. And I'll get past all these things that are in the cooker and get them published. And I'm really excited about it.
Well, when you think about your future designs, do you see them as something functional that everybody is gonna wear, or do you see them as high fashion, couture, walkways? Like, where is your dreams taking you?
Well, you know, one of my favorite inspiration is Iris Apfel. Do you know who she is? She's 100 years old, and she is just this fabulous lady who she's kind of like the Cyndi Lauper of centenarians, you know. And I am designing for her. Because I'm an older woman, but I don't want to look like a little old lady. I want to design for that woman that has a certain mojo, who's not afraid to look different. I mean, why not? I mean, why not? I remember in middle school, and when you're a teenager, you're trying to fit in, you're trying to be like everyone else. And that first year of middle school, I was just following the lackeys, or I was the lackey. I just realized I was just like a little lapdog, and I realized, no, the way to do this is I have to create the Dorothy Bulac fan club, and I'm the first member. And you have to it's scary to be different from everybody else, but I celebrate being different. So I am designing for the person who wants to be different.
I mean, I love that, because this is like such a, you know, permission to be you.
Yes, yeah.
And I feel like we all sort of need it at some point to say, you know, like, who do I have to please? Like, it's all about pleasing myself, my inner self, you know?
Yeah. You know, they say now, like, the crafts person is dead, or at least, you know, used to have the cobbler and used to have this. And I used to think that with the entertainment industry, what we do, it's the last bastion of artisans who can do things and be paid well for it. But now I realize that knitters, we have such a resurgence, and I really think it has everything to do with the internet, and that people can learn from wherever. But you can put your own personal stamp on things, and you can be a craftsman, an artisan, to make beautiful things on your own and make it your own.
Well, I hope Portugal is ready for what's coming its way. But I wanted to ask you about hula dancing as well, like, since we're already talking. Tell me about that, because it says so on your Instagram that you could be persuaded to hula dance. So how did that become a thing?
Okay, well, on my dad, I'm half Swedish, but I'm also half Filipino. My dad's side of the family, my grandfather came from the Philippines when they needed workers in Hawaii to work the sugarcane fields and the pineapple fields. So all my dad's side of the family is in the Hawaiian Islands. And so they are very much ensconced in the hula dancing. I have two sisters, and they are I always say I'm the hack. That's why I have to be coerced to do this. But my sisters have professionally danced. They've danced at Tokyo Disneyland and cruises and things like that. And they belong to their own hulaus. But I have an auntie who is my inspiration, and she would have this big luau for her 50th birthday, her 60th birthday. She is now 9, and then she had it every 5 years. She had the last one she had was her 95th. So we flew to Albany, New York. So it's not even here. She would have a luau in Albany. And she said, okay, girls, you're the entertainment. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We had to do it. So, but through the years, we've stopped doing the Tahitians. That's the one with the really super wiggly hips, and we slow, like, we're not showing this part of our, our abdomen anymore. So we're now doing a slower hula. But that's what that's all about. It's my dad's side of the family.
If you think back on your life, it's sort of like you were always at the right place at the right time, saying yes to the right thing. Do you see it that way? Like, do you feel like you were lucky? Do you think it's luck, or do you think it's all the hard work, dedication? Like, where's your success comes from?
I have to say that luck can play a part of it. But it is a lot of sweat and tears and dedication. At the beginning, you can't say no. You have to say yes to everything. You can't be afraid of something you've never done before. You also have to know when you're over your head. But I think that's why I like the entertainment industry, because you get to meet new people and see how they do things. And you just don't know where your life's going to go. I mean, I, did the walkarounds and, until I got tired of it. So it's, you do this until you've reached the limit. So you don't know where it's all going to lead. But when you're at more of the end of it, you go, oh, I see how this was all connected. When you're in the midst of it, you don't know. But I see that every single thing that I've done has a connection with something else. So it's all in coherent and commingled like that. So there's a little, I was in the right place at the right time. And maybe that window is now closed for other people to get into it, but there are new openings for people.
I mean, so where do you see yourself as far as your knitwear design career? Are you just opened that door?
I can't wait. I can't wait to play with, I want to get really three-dimensional. I have all these ideas of making things look like circuitry and I can't wait. I just
Dorothy, I want to do one thing I've never done before on this show. I want to invite you back 5 years from now. And I want to talk to you and see what you created in that. I want you to be the first to do Where Is She Now?
Okay, that's a deal. That'll be my carrot to say, okay, I have to see her again in 5 years. I better, get the lead out and do something really innovative.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing your ideas and your dreams with me today. And I loved having you on my channel. I'm so glad you agreed to be my guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And I can't wait to see what's coming in the next 5 years. We have a date.
Great.